Do you ever wonder how some people seem to have unshakable confidence in almost anything that they do? It's almost like they feel like they can walk through walls. They never have self doubt. They seem to never question themselves, and they're always just radiating this sense of true self confidence. And have you ever wondered how you could achieve that same state, or if it's even possible for you to do that? Well, if you've ever wondered this or had these questions, then sit down and stay tuned, because in today's video, I'm going to share with you the 10 things that I have learned to help me build true self-confidence. So guys, let me first start by saying that what I'm about to share with you today is not something that is working or on 100% of the time. In other words, if I were to sit here and tell you that I'm 100% confident in myself at all times, I would be lying to you. There are times where I'm uncertain of myself, where I'm questioning myself, where I'm doubting my ability, where I'm being a little pessimistic, where I'm looking at the worst case scenario. And so this doesn't work 100% all the time. In fact, I don't think any human being can honestly say that they are 100% confident at all times. But what I'm going to share with you has enabled me to be confident most of the time and to be able to do it in situations where I would otherwise doubt myself. You see, it's one thing to be confident and to feel good about yourself when everything's going right. It's another thing to be able to build that confidence and experience it even in times of uncertainty and turmoil. And I certainly have been in my share of uncertainty and turmoil in my life. In fact, I went to federal prison when I was 20 years old. I was the youngest inmate in the facility at 20 years old for a crime that I committed where I worked in a illegal stock operation for 3 months from the age of 17 to 18. I started at 17, I turned 18, and then I quit the job when I turned 18. I worked there for 3 months, and I still wound up doing a 5-month sentence because I didn't want to cooperate with the FBI and put other people in jail. That's another story for another video. But I was the youngest person in that prison. 3 years later, I almost died in a car accident. I flipped my car over. I broke my hip. I got a contusion on my lung. I was hospitalized for almost 2 weeks. It took me 3 months to almost walk again. I had no insurance. I had no job. I had absolutely nothing. And I had to start again completely from scratch. My business nearly fell apart and dwindled down to almost nothing after COVID, and I found myself in a situation where I did not know how I was going to provide for my family or where my next dollar was going to come from. And then at age 40 years old, just 2 months after my 40th birthday, I had a widowmaker heart attack and I almost died. I was literally within seconds of losing my life. If my wife did not call 911 when she did, or the paramedics would have gotten stuck in traffic. I mean, it was literally a matter of minutes between me being here, being able to shoot this video for you and with you, and me being a distant memory. And so I share this with you to share with you that I have been through my share of tough times, turmoil, and uncertainty. And what I'm going to share with you today are the 10 lessons that I've learned to be able to get through that and have this unbreakable confidence even in those times. And I'm talking about true confidence. I'm not talking about posturing. See, posturing is when you're pretending to be confident to impress other people. I'm talking about a true sense of self-confidence where it's not about other people, where you can look in the mirror at yourself and be 100% honest with yourself and say, yes, I'm confident and I have a belief in myself right now that I can overcome this challenge. And so the first thing is you need to be able to do uncomfortable and hard things. You see, the mind is a survival mechanism, and one of its main jobs is to protect us. And one of the ways that it protects us is by scanning our environment and identifying things that are unfamiliar to us and possibly a threat to us. So the reality is the mind, for the most part, wants to keep us away from hard, difficult things. This is a primal instinct that dates back thousands of years to when we as a species had to constantly protect ourselves from threats to our lives and to our resources. And unfortunately, that is a part of our brain that hasn't really fully evolved yet. And so a lot of times we can find ourselves in this state of survival where we are avoiding unfamiliar, uncomfortable things. And what I'm here to tell you is the more you do that, the worse it becomes. In fact, every time you avoid doing something hard, something uncomfortable, something that you don't really want to do, what you do is you send yourself a little message that you're not capable of overcoming obstacles. And so when the time comes that you actually need to be able to find that confidence and find that self-assurance that you can overcome a challenge or an obstacle, unfortunately, you're not going to have the track record there. You're not going to have that internal frame of reference to be able to say, well, you know what? This happened to me and I was able to get through it, or I didn't want to do this, but I pushed through and did it anyway. I found myself in this situation and I was able to overcome it. See, if you make a habit of constantly avoiding hard or uncomfortable things, you are setting a precedent for yourself that you're unable to overcome obstacles or face challenges. And the reality is they are never going to go away. As long as you are a living, breathing human being, you are going to experience obstacles, challenges, uncertainty, and pain points at some point in your life. And the sooner you get used to doing hard, uncomfortable, challenging things, the better and more equipped you're going to be able to deal with those when they actually pop up in real life. So the first thing I would tell you to do is to challenge your limits regularly by stepping out of your comfort zone and build mental resilience by embracing discomfort as a way to strengthen your mental fortitude. Try and explore new things that you haven't done before. In fact, like I would go as far as to say is some of the most rewarding and fulfilling things that I've experienced in my life are things that I did not want to do in the very beginning. So public speaking, for example, speaking at events, speaking in front of audiences and traveling around the United States to speak to people was something I didn't want to do. In fact, I would not get on a plane for, I think it was 11 years. I didn't get on a plane. So I'd been flying since I'm a baby. And when I was 32 years old, I took my wife to Miami for a trip for her, a weekend trip for her birthday. And on the way back, we hit some pretty nasty turbulence. I wouldn't say it was like severe turbulence, but it was enough to like scare me. And that feeling of complete lack of control freaked me out. And I think I flew one more time after that, but then I found a way to avoid it for 11 years. And it wasn't until I think 11 or 12 years later, I got invited to speak at a mastermind. And I knew, first of all, the person that invited me to the mastermind was somebody that I admired very much. I knew that this would be a life-changing event. I knew that I would get a lot of value from it. I know that I would impart a lot of value, and I just knew that it would be a good experience, and it would be an opportunity for me to face this fear of flying again, because I had found a way to avoid it for a very long time. And so I took that flight, and the rest is history. It was a life-changing event. I spoke at the event. Almost everybody that was at the event came up to me afterwards and told me that my presentations was one of the most touching, impactful presentations. I built business relationships and friendships at that single event that have been hugely positively impactful on both my personal life and my business. And I think I've flown a total of probably close to 30 times. This was 2 years ago. I've flown close to 30 times, maybe even more since that happened. And now I don't even think about it. And that first flight was I was in my head so much, man, I haven't done this in so long. What if this happens? What if that happens? And now I just don't even think about it anymore because I put myself in that situation to do the hard, uncomfortable thing. Number 2 is to keep your promises and your commitments. This is a big one. And a lot of people don't realize that the ability to keep commitments and keep promises is so tightly tied to your self-confidence. I think it was Myron Golden. Go check out his channel. You probably don't even need me to tell you to go check out his channel because his channel is huge. It's very popular on YouTube, and there's a reason why. It's because he shares very insightful wisdom. And I think it was he who said in one of his videos, when it comes to like self-confidence, you're the only person that knows every lie you've ever told. You're the only person that knows every time you took a shortcut. You're the only person that knows every time you said you were going to follow through on something and you didn't. So nobody else in the world knows your deepest, darkest secrets except you. And so the problem is that if you find yourself in a challenging situation where you need to rely on some sort of self-confidence, one of the ways that you could do that is by reflecting on your commitments and your consistency and your ability to follow through on things. And if that's not there, if that track record of keeping commitments and following through on things isn't there, then you don't really have much to rely on in terms of building true self-confidence. See, that's the difference between the posturing and the true self-confidence when you can look in the mirror and say, did I take any shortcuts? Have I done this the right way? Have I put in the reps? Have I put in the time to where I can feel like I can really overcome this thing and I'm justified in actually having this true self-confidence? If the track record isn't there and you have a history of not keeping promises and not following through on your commitments, then you are going to find yourself in a very tough situation when it comes to actually channeling that confidence based on that track record. So I'm a big believer in keeping my word. Like one thing, I am not perfect, but one thing I always do is if I say I'm going to do something, especially if I publicly make a statement that I'm going to do something, I follow through on it. And if I tell someone that I'm going to do something, I follow through on it. Now, I may take my time thinking about whether or not I actually want to make that commitment. I might ponder. I might evaluate. I might take longer time than usual to determine if this is a promise I actually want to make. But once I make the decision, and I make the promise and I make the commitment, I make it my business to stick to that promise and to stick to my commitments. So you want to strengthen your relationships by following through on your commitments, not only your relationships with other people, but the relationship that you have with yourself. Number 3 is to do some form of physical exercise every single day. Guys, I would even say that maybe this is the most important one. Maybe this is number 1 on the list. I mean, you could theoretically categorize this under number 1 of doing something uncomfortable or doing something hard, but I can tell you that doing something physical every single day, without a doubt, bar none, like far and away, has had the greatest impact on my life, more than anything else, more than other things combined. And it's an endless amount of benefits that I could cite that come with this. But today we're talking about confidence. So let me tell you why doing some form of physical exercise every single day builds confidence. So number one, it reduces stress and it releases endorphins that help you de-stress, decompress, and feel better about yourself. See, lots of times if you're lacking confidence, it's because you're stressed and you're uncertain, or maybe you're sensing some form of anxiety because you're worried about something. And so you're in your head, you're worried, you're in this state of stress. And the truth is, like, you're probably just not thinking clearly. And the reason why is because your body is being overrun with other chemicals like cortisol, for example. And until you release that and get that out of your body and then flood your body with dopamine and endorphins and oxytocin and all these chemicals that have a positive impact on you, you're going to continue to stay in that state of anxiety. I could tell you that when my business nearly fell apart a few years back and I had nothing, what I said to myself was, when I woke up every day, and I was waking up in a sense of depression, in a state of hopelessness, feeling a state of dread, feeling definitely a state of uncertainty. What I would say to myself is, what's the one immediate thing that I can control right now? And so from reading a lot of books, what I learned is that I could actually control the way I felt, but I wasn't there yet. And that's another topic for another video. But what I could control were my actions, and those actions could indirectly have an impact on the way that I felt. And so what I felt was that before I started my workout, so I set a goal to do something physical every day. And before I started my workout, I was feeling stress, I was feeling anxiety, I certainly was not feeling confidence. And as I began the workout, like, I didn't want to do it. My brain was telling me, this is a waste of time, this doesn't feel good, go back to bed, crawl under the covers, hide from the world. But I pushed through and did it anyway. And what I found was that after the first 10 or 15 minutes, something started to change, where I started to feel better and I started to feel stronger and my thinking started to become clearer. And by the time I was done with that workout, I felt like a different person. Had my problems gone away? Had my challenges dissipated? No. They were still there, but I was different. I changed. I felt a sense of clarity. I felt a sense of stress relief. And so really it got to the point for me where the exercise was almost like a drug, where I needed to do it every day in order to reduce that level of stress and anxiety to be able to take on the day, because otherwise I would just be bombarded with all these different thoughts that were not serving me. And so the exercise really became my crutch. It also helped me build discipline and consistency in keeping my commitments, right? Which is the second thing that I talked about. Every time you make a commitment and you stick to it, you're making a deposit in that confidence bank account, so that, again, when it comes time to be able to rely on that confidence, you have the track record there. You can look in the mirror and say, you know, I set the commitment to do something physical every day and I did it. And so that's another payoff. Another payoff is that my body physically started to change. I've probably lost 20 to 25 pounds, maybe 2 or 3 inches off my waist since I started consistently exercising and doing something physical every single day, which is another payoff, because when you feel better about your physical appearance, you're gonna feel more confident as a byproduct of that. It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to change your physical appearance to the point that you feel that you look different and not feel better about yourself. It's almost impossible for that to happen. So that's yet another payoff. So for me, what I have found is I try to do physical activity that I enjoy. So for me, my top 3 physical activities are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I have been training for going on 12 years now at this point, kettlebells, and walking. So I have my reasons why those things work for me. I think when it comes to jiu-jitsu, it's the camaraderie and the connection aspect of it, that I'm doing it with other people. We're all kind of like looking out for each other. We're all growing together. We laugh, we joke, we really push each other. We hold each other accountable. So there's the community aspect of that. And then plus, it's exciting. It's one of those few things that puts you in a situation where for that specific time when you're sparring or training with somebody, like, you gotta be 100% present in the moment. So you're not thinking about your bills, you're not thinking about your relationship that's falling apart, you're not thinking about the challenges or problems that your kids are going through. You are 100% present in that moment. And so for me, BJJ is number 1. Number 2 is kettlebells. So I've been in gyms my whole life. In fact, before starting my own business, I was in the fitness business as a salesperson, then as a corporate salesperson, then as a general manager. In fact, this building right here where I rent my office space from, the other side of it is a fitness club. So I've been around gyms my whole life, have nothing against them. I have a gym membership and I use it from time to time. But for me, kettlebells are a lot more exciting because they're unconventional. And plus, I can get multiple things done. I can improve strength, I can improve endurance, I can improve cardiovascular endurance as I'm doing a kettlebell workout. And for me, they are just more fun and more interesting. And so that's what works for me. There are plenty of people out there that will tell you kettlebells are the only way to go. There are people out there that will tell you that they hate kettlebells and they love weight training. Find what works for you. And then lastly is on days where I don't do any kettlebells or any BJJ, I just walk. I walk for a minimum of a half hour, sometimes up to an hour, 2 hours, but at minimum 30 minutes. And I try to do it in a park, so I'm surrounded by trees and I'm getting sunlight. And what I found is that I do some of my best thinking. I'm able to listen to some audiobooks and get some insights as I'm doing that. And I always feel better after a walk. I feel like I get a new sense of clarity and I can tick that box that I followed my commitment for the day. And so one of my commitments, by the way, in terms of helping get my weight down is keeping track of my calories. So I know exactly how many calories I need to eat per day, and I know how much I burn with each workout. I know how much I burn when I do jiu-jitsu. I know how much I burn roughly when I walk and how much I burn when I do kettlebells. And then it's really just a mathematical game at that point of figuring out, well, what did I burn? What's my target for the day or my limit for the day? And then what have I eaten so far and what do I have left? And so that just, again, reinforces, okay, well, I did the activity today to account for the calories that I'm about to eat in this meal. So I cannot stress enough the importance of doing some form of physical exercise every single day. Number 4 is to invest in your communication skills, both internally and externally. Look, it's no secret that I value the ability to communicate. This entire channel is about the ability to communicate. My entire business, this specific business, is about helping people become better communicators. I believe that the ability to effectively communicate is the most important skill set that anybody can develop. And I'm talking about both externally with other people and internally to yourself. The dialogue that goes on in your head, the self-talk, the communication that you have with yourself is just as important, arguably even more important than the communication that you have with other people. And so, just like any other skill, some people are born a little bit ahead in the race. Maybe they have a natural charisma or a natural ability to communicate with other people. Maybe they're naturally funny. Maybe they magnetize people towards them and they just have that kind of magnetic personality. And then there are people that just have to work a little bit harder at it like anybody else. But that is true of every other aspect of life, right? In every other aspect of life, there are certain people that definitely start out with a bit of a head start. They've definitely got some God-given talents and abilities that put them a little bit ahead of the average person. And then there are some people that just have to work towards it and improve themselves. And even those people that do have those God-given abilities should still be investing and leveling up their skill set when it comes to communication. You know, I say this all the time. There was an episode of Joe Rogan that I was watching, and he had Michio Kaku on there. And who's a very smart guy. And one of the things that he said was that there are three things that separate us from every other species on the planet in terms of like our superiority and our ability to thrive above everything else. And so number one is opposable thumbs. We've got these opposable thumbs which allow us to manipulate and hold things. Number two is our predator eyesight, our ability to hunt and kill and identify bigger things that are bigger than we are. And then the third thing is this, our voice, our ability to communicate with each other. So if you think about that, like 33%, 1/3 of the things that make us a superior species have to do with our ability to communicate. And yet people think that this is not something they should be investing in. I mean, people invest in all kinds of things when it comes to their body or entertaining themselves or playing sports or passions that they might have. But like 1/3 of what makes us special is our ability to communicate. For me, that's a no-brainer. That deserves attention. That deserves an investment in terms of time, money, energy, resources, right? We can't make our thumbs, we can't improve our opposable thumbs, although maybe we can. We can't improve our predator eyesight, but we can certainly improve our ability to communicate both with other people and with ourselves internally. So that's number 4. Number 5, which is tied to that, is to master your body language. It's been said that the majority of communication that takes place between one or more people takes place non-verbally, meaning what you say with your body actually communicates more of your message than what you say verbally to someone else. And this is something that happens on an unconscious level. Again, it goes back to primitive times, thousands of years ago, where we as a species had to be able to identify threats and assess them and figure out, is this person or thing here to harm me or help me? Is it here to subtract from my resources? And so there was a time in human history where we didn't have verbal language and we had to communicate non-verbally. And so we still have this ability hardwired into us. So my point is that if you don't master your body language, if you don't understand your body language, if you don't understand other people's body language, you could possibly be thwarting and counteracting the communication that you're using with your mouth. So like maybe you've learned all the greatest voice techniques, tactics, tonality, rhythm, volume, pace, like you've learned how to become a great speaker, but you don't know how to match that with the body language that supports it. Or you don't know how to read body language to understand what you should be saying or what you should be picking up on from the person that you're communicating with. It's also been shown that our body language can influence our state of mind. It can influence our confidence level. Amy Cuddy has a very famous TED Talk where she talks about how our body language influences our feelings and our emotional states. So if you're walking around in a weakened state of body language, it doesn't matter how confident you tell yourself you are. If a person is pretending to be confident, but they're standing like this and they're talking low, it doesn't matter how confident they are telling themselves they are. Changing your posture, gesturing from the chest and the navel area, keeping your head up, your chin, projecting your voice, these things have a positive impact on our emotions, on our feelings, and our confidence. So if you haven't studied the area of body language or nonverbal language, I would suggest that you start doing that very soon. Whether you watch free videos, you buy courses, you read books, whatever it may be, but it's essential that you understand that. Number 6 is to commit to becoming great at one thing at a time. And I can tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, this is where I have struggled the most. By nature, I am a curious person. I also have a tendency to be impatient. And when you combine curiosity with impatience, what you wind up with is this cocktail of shiny object syndrome, flip-flopping, jumping from one thing to the next, and never really putting your focus and your attention on one thing. And the problem is that if you're constantly shifting your focus to different things, you never really become proficient at one specific thing. And when you don't become proficient at something, it negatively impacts your confidence, because your proficiency or your ability to do something has a direct impact on your confidence, right? Like if you're lacking confidence, lots of times it's because you don't feel confident in your ability to execute a task, to achieve a goal, to get something done. And one of the reasons maybe why you struggle to do that is because you never actually committed to focusing on being able to do something specifically, because right when the time comes for you to get through that discomfort of getting better at that thing, you jump to the next thing. Like I said, this was by far the worst thing for me, or the worst thing that I struggled the most with. Like, if you look at my Kindle account, you will see that 80% of the books in my Kindle account are 20% read. Think about that. 80% of the books, I've only read 20% of those books. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about my behavior, right? I could sit here and I could tell you I'm focused. I could tell you I'm confident. I could tell you I'm disciplined. I could tell you I'm strict. But ultimately, my behavior is going to speak more to those things than what I'm saying. And so if you went just on my behavior, you'd say, man, this guy doesn't commit to anything. He just buys books, gets excited, starts reading about them, learning these new concepts, and then around 20% of the way through, he gets bored and moves on to the next thing. Now, here's the thing. I recognized this months ago, and so I stopped it. And now I made a commitment to not start a new book or a new audio book until I finish the one that I'm currently reading. And so far, I've been on a very good track. I've so far finished 3 or 4 books, I think, in the past maybe 2 months. And so I'm completing things. Another thing that I've done is in business, I was constantly chasing opportunities. So you know how like they say, like some people, like we're all surrounded with opportunities, but some people just, they don't open their mind to the opportunity, so they don't see the opportunity, they don't identify the opportunity. So that was never my problem. My problem is that I was identifying too many opportunities. And part of the reason for that was that throughout the years, I've developed lots of different skill sets. Now, granted, I've never become world class at any of them. I've become really good at some of them, like marketing and copywriting, for example. I've become very, very good, like I would say better than average at those things because I've spent so long doing them and I've put in so many reps when it comes to crafting marketing campaigns, writing sales letters, writing copy. Like I wouldn't say I'm a master of those things, but I've gotten better than average at those things. And so what I found is that because I was proficient at, I had some level of proficiency at a number of different things, when an opportunity would come my way, I would say, oh, well, I know how to do that, so I could actually capitalize on that opportunity. I could be involved in that business, right? And so like at one point I had a business that sold subliminal audios. I had a clothing brand. I had a supplement brand. I had like all of these different things that I was involved in. And the reality is that I was just being pulled in way too many directions. And the more I studied really successful people, what I realized is that there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, the most successful people master and become successful at one thing. Now you might say, oh yeah, but what about multiple streams of income or not putting all your eggs in one basket? Yeah, I think that's true too. But I think what I was doing was I was trying to spread myself out without actually mastering one thing before doing that. So my advice is, yeah, don't spread yourself too thin and don't put all your eggs in one basket, but you first got to actually execute and deliver on the thing that you set out for first before you can move on to the other thing. So in other words, if let's say you start a digital business where you sell digital courses and you set a goal to get that business to $100,000 a month, but then you see the opportunity to start a supplement business when your current business is nowhere near $100,000 a month, and then your thinking is, well, I'll just start a supplement business so that I'll have multiple businesses. Yeah, but the reality is, if you haven't solved the problems and hit the goals and the targets that you want to hit in this business, what makes you think you're going to be able to do it in the next business? So my advice is focus on one thing, hit your targets, hit your goals, follow through on your commitments as it relates to that one thing, and then you can start exploring other things. And so what I've done is I sat down with myself and I had a really a good conversation, right? I talk about the ability to communicate internally. And what I found is that my unique ability, as Dan Sullivan calls it, is the ability to communicate with people. First and foremost, it's where I add the most value, right? So let's start there. Identifying your unique ability, that's another video for another day. But what I found is that my unique ability is the ability to communicate with people, specifically to take concepts that would otherwise be complex or confusing to someone and communicate them in a way that the person not only understands it, but can then take that and go apply it to their business or to their life, and then they see results from it. And it took me a long time to figure out that that was actually my unique ability. But once I did figure that out, I said to myself, okay, moving forward, I am not going to entertain or involve myself in any opportunities or ventures that do not support this goal and this vision of what I want. And so I love coaching people. I love working with people. Now, ironically, going back to number one of doing uncomfortable things, for years that was the thing I avoided. So when I started my publishing business, my goal was not to work with people. It was certainly to teach people and to communicate indirectly to people through courses and stuff like that. But I did not want to work with people. In fact, I was seeking the complete opposite of that. I was seeking complete autonomy, where I could create a business that would allow me to get some passive income, do what I want, when I want, not be accountable to anybody, not have to show up for a meeting. I could pick my kids up from school, take them to school, go on school trips with them, go on vacations with them, and have the time and freedom to do whatever I wanted. And for years, that business served that purpose. And then it wasn't until after COVID where I jumped into a group coaching program where I wound up being one of the more experienced people in the group and helping other people that I realized, you know what? I'm actually getting more enjoyment and fulfillment out of this than what I was doing in the past. It's funny, this is the thing I was avoiding, and yet this is like what I'm finding actually lights my soul on fire and is where I add the most value. And so I subtracted or deleted any opportunity or venture that I was involved in that did not support that goal, that purpose, or that vision. And so now, the few business ventures that I am involved in, I am only involved in them because in those businesses, my role is to help people through group coaching and one-on-one coaching, because that supports my goal. Now, do I do things in those businesses from time to time that are outside of my unique ability? Like, for example, do I do marketing in those businesses? Yes, I do. Sometimes I will create marketing campaigns in those businesses, but I do that because it's a means to an end. I know that I could use this skill set that I've acquired over the years to help me get closer to what my overall goal and purpose are. And so in those contexts, I will do things that might not necessarily be like my passion or what I'm here to do, but it's a means to an end. And so what I found is that getting clear and specific on your goals for the specific area you want to master is key. You want to focus on quality over quantity in your practice and your learning. And you want to seek expert guidance from mentors or resources so that you can improve faster. But the point is, if you find yourself scattered, where you're trying to do too many different things at once, then you need to take a step back. Now, what I will say is there is a caveat to this, because if you haven't figured out what your unique ability is, what your passion is, what your purpose is, if you haven't figured that out yet, then what I would say is you should be experiencing and trying lots of different things to get you there. But once you start to feel like, okay, this is the thing I think I could be great at, this is the thing I enjoy doing, and most importantly, this is the thing where I feel like I can add the most value to other people, and this is the thing I'm going to triple down on, at least for the foreseeable future, until I can master this and become great at it. Next is to focus on the future version of yourself. I've been talking about Dr. Benjamin Hardy's books recently on the channel. I've read almost all of his books very recently. I love his books because I love the way he articulates the science behind a lot of the self-improvement strategies in his books. And one of his recent books that I read is called Become Your Future Self Now. And one of the concepts that he talks about in the book is how for a very long time, psychologists were telling people that their identity is based on their past. It's based on events that happened to them in the past. So in other words, what happened to you in the past dictates who you are today. And what the new research is finding is that that's not true. It's actually based on a future projection of yourself. And so number 7 in becoming confident is to focus on the future version of yourself rather than the past. But here's what you have to realize. That future version of yourself is oftentimes going to be wildly different than the person you are now. And so you might have beliefs, you might be executing actions, you might have outlooks on things in the future that are very different from the person you are today. But what works for me is I'm always visualizing my ideal self and creating a detailed image of that person. I set forward looking goals to align my actions with my future self. And I act as if I am already that person. You know, a great quote that I actually have on my phone, I have this on my screensaver of my phone, is, I don't know if you could see that, but success is something you attract by the person you become. I learned that from Jim Rohn. Success is something you attract by the person you become. And so if I have a version of myself that I want to become, well, then I start acting like that person now. And like, it could be something as simple as changing the way you dress. So if you have a future projected version of yourself that dresses and carries themselves in a certain way, then start dressing and carrying yourself like that person now. If that person has routines that they do, start doing those routines now. You know, again, I told myself I want to become a great coach. I want to help other people. I want to be a vessel for information and a leader that helps people, a servant leader that helps people by adding value to their lives. But yet, I wasn't truly optimizing my own life. So I was still engaging in behaviors and doing things that I really didn't want to be doing, like drinking alcohol or not exercising the way I wanted to, or not setting commitments and following through on them, or oversleeping. And I got rid of all of that stuff. And the reason why I got rid of that stuff is because it doesn't support the future version of who I want to be. Now, this is why this is important when it comes to confidence, because you might have a point where you're at a certain point in your life that maybe you're not happy with. Maybe you're comparing yourself to other people. Maybe you're like, man, this person has this much money and I don't. This person has the perfect marriage and I don't. This person has the perfect house and car and family and I don't, and whatever it may be. Oftentimes when we do that, we look to our past and we start thinking about everything that we did up to that point to put us in the position that we're in, that we're not happy with. We start beating ourselves up over it. And you might say to yourself, like, wow, what does that say about me? The fact that I don't have any money at this age of my life, the fact that I haven't gotten married at this stage, the fact that I don't have kids, the fact that I don't have my own house, the fact that I don't have my own business, whatever it may be. But you are not your past, and your past does not dictate who you are today, unless you allow it to. I choose to reframe my past, and I choose to take past events, mistakes, lessons that I've learned, and channel them in such a way where I say these have impacted me positively. They've helped me grow as a person. They've helped me build character. They've instilled wisdom in me that I would not have been able to get any way else. This is the path that the Creator has chosen for me for whatever reason, and I'm going to use this to my advantage to help become more successful and to help other people. And that's the future version of myself. So remember, if you start looking back on your past about mistakes that you made, incorrect choices that you made, and you start beating yourself up over it, you're going to subtract from your confidence. Instead, look to the future version of yourself and realize that maybe you're not there yet, but you are doing the things that support the vision of that person right now. So again, not every day is going to be perfect. And, you know, sometimes I do have days where there are parts of my life that I'm like, man, I'm still not there yet. But I say to myself, I have the future goal. I have the future vision. Did I do everything today to support that vision? If the answer is yes, then I have nothing to feel bad about, nothing to feel guilty about, and nothing to feel unconfident about. Number 8, is just kind of a repeat of what I just said. I just touched on it, is to learn to reframe. You got to learn to shift perspectives to see challenges and setbacks from different angles. If you spend the majority of your life living in the past and allowing that to shape your identity, you're not only going to stifle your ability to build confidence, but you could potentially put yourself into a state of depression. Because right now, we have the faculties and the abilities to change our reality, to change our future. As long as you are living and breathing and walking this earth, you have the ability to change. It doesn't matter if you did something yesterday that you regret. Today's a new day. But if you keep living in the past, if you keep allowing those things to shape your identity, if you keep assigning the meaning of who you are in a negative way to those negative things or mistakes or challenges or setbacks or strokes of bad luck that you had, you're going to manifest that all over again, right? Everything that you think, everything that you focus on, everything that you have your attention on ultimately manifests in your reality. If you're living in the past and focusing on bad things that happen to you, you're only going to attract more bad things. So you need to learn to reframe those things. So what I do is I focus on positives by identifying opportunities in every situation. So, for example, I told you earlier that I went to federal prison when I was 20 years old. Now, again, this crime that I committed, I take 100% responsibility for it. I did it. I knew it was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. So I worked at this place for 3 months, June, July, and August. When I took the job, I was 17. I turned 18 in July, and then I quit in August at 18 years old. From 17 to 18, I took this job. Now, what I've learned is that, like, the male brain isn't even fully developed until the age of 25 years old. So could I go back and say, like, man, my brain wasn't even fully developed at that point. I didn't really know what I was doing. So, yeah, but I would have to be careful there because I also don't want to, like, start going into victimhood. Like, oh, this should have never happened to me. It wasn't my fault. And because I am a person that takes responsibility for things and I don't believe in victimhood, what I find, though, is that I was going the opposite way and beating myself up too much about that. And I was living in a state of shame and guilt unconsciously without even realizing it. Guilt about the fact that people lost money, guilt about the fact that I committed a crime, guilt about the fact of what I put my parents through. And that guilt was eating away at me for years. And it was truly preventing me from becoming the next version of myself. And it wasn't until I learned to reframe that experience and say, you did it, you made a mistake, you paid your debt to society, you were certainly punished for it, and what lessons have you learned from it? What lessons have you learned that you could pass on to other people? One of them is the lesson I'm sharing with you right now, is just because you make a mistake at any point in your life, if you repay the debt of that mistake, walking around in a state of shame and guilt is not going to serve you. In fact, in the book, Power versus Force, written by Dr. David Hawkins, in that book, he talks about the map of emotions and the map of consciousness ranging from the lowest emotions to the highest. And on that scale, the two lowest emotions, the emotions that keep you in a weakened state, that wreak havoc on your life, are shame and guilt. They are worse than anger. You're actually better off walking around angry than you are walking around in a state of shame and guilt. And so one of the ways that I learned to overcome that was by reframing previous experiences. And I found opportunities for growth and learning in difficult circumstances. And I practice gratitude to shift my focus on what is going well. That's another way to reframe. Instead of focusing on what is going wrong in your life, what you're not happy with, learn to reframe and shift and focus on the things that are going right in your life. That will help you build more confidence. Number 9 is to stack small wins. So set achievable goals by breaking larger tasks into smaller, manageable steps. Look, the reality is every time you experience a victory or a win, it's going to reinforce your confidence. Again, because you're going to have that track record to go back to. Setting big goals is great. Setting audacious goals is great. Setting big targets is great. The challenge is that sometimes those big targets take a while to hit. And so instead, what you should be doing is focusing on smaller goals that ultimately support that larger goal so that you have a shorter window of time to experience a win so you could start building up your track record, right? Because if, let's say, you focus on one goal and you tell yourself that you're not going to feel good about yourself or you're not going to consider it a win until you hit that goal, but that goal takes you a year. Well, now you're going a whole year without any small wins to count toward your track record because you're just waiting for that big win. The reality is that if you are doing what you need to do to achieve that goal, you already are experiencing small wins. It's just a matter of identifying them and categorizing them so that you are aware that they're happening and you can invest those in the confidence bank. You want to celebrate small successes to build momentum and motivation. And you want to stay motivated by recognizing the value of incremental progress. Because, again, that lets you know that you are on a path, that you are serving a purpose, that you have an end goal. So stack small wins. And then last is to develop self-awareness. So this could arguably be the first one on this list, but I'm saving it for last. So when I talk about self-awareness, I'm talking about it in two contexts. Number one is like you gotta be aware of who you are as a person and what your strengths and weaknesses or what your strengths and challenges are. We all have them. Every single one of us has things that we are naturally stronger at and things that we are naturally challenged by. It's just a fact of human life. And so the key is to really be aware of the things that you can categorize as strengths versus the things that just are harder for you than they are for the average person. And I'm a big believer in playing to your strengths. You gotta play to your strengths, and you have to find ways to compensate for your weaknesses or for your challenges. And usually that comes in the form of another person. So another great book by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan is a book called Who Not How. Very eye-opening book. And it's based on this idea that if you want to achieve a goal, instead of thinking about how to achieve it, think about who you need to help you achieve that goal. And so, again, for me, this is a big shift because for me, I always had this mindset that I needed to do everything myself. And I think a lot of that was tied to the unconscious shame and guilt that I had because of prior mistakes that I felt like now, because I made a mistake and committed a crime and took a shortcut, now I need to do everything the hard way. I need to do everything myself. I need to put in the blood, sweat, and tears. And like the reality is putting in hard work and putting in blood, sweat, and tears and doing everything yourself are two different things. Like you could put in the hard work, the dedication, the blood, sweat, and tears, but you could also have other people help you and not do everything yourself. In fact, what I would say is put in the hard work, the dedication, the consistency on the things that you are naturally good at, and then find the who's that leverage the other things that you're not so great at or that you just don't want to do. And so this was a big shift for me. So now again, in any new business venture, let's say that I'm involved in, again, it's really two criteria that I'm looking for now. Number one, is there a place where I could add value to this through my unique ability, right? So is there a way for me to add value in this business venture to the customers, doing what I'm uniquely qualified to do, that I actually love to do? And then the second thing is there already somebody else that's filling that role, or am I the person that fills that role? And will there be somebody else that does the things that I'm not good at? So in other words, like, I'm not going to jump into a business partnership with somebody who's got the same skill sets as I do, or the same abilities that I do. There's no point in doing that. If both of us are great coaches, well, who's going to be the CFO? Who's going to be the CEO? Who's going to be in charge of operations? Who's going to be in charge of finances? All the things that I'm terrible at, right? So I need somebody that has strengths in those areas to compensate for the weaknesses that I have in those areas. And really being self-aware is important, because if you're not self-aware, what you could wind up doing is misleading and fooling yourself into thinking that you have abilities and skill sets that you might not. And then what that leads you to do is try to execute and excel in those skill sets, and then you keep experiencing failure, and then that diminishes your confidence. When the reality is, it's not that you're incapable, it's just that you're not playing to your strengths. You're not shooting the ball from the easiest distance to actually get it in the basket. You're shooting it from the furthest position away, which is making it more difficult for you. So that's the first part of self-awareness, is being aware of your natural talents and abilities and skill sets. And then the second part of self-awareness is just being aware of your thoughts, emotions, and actions. So I read another book recently called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And one of the concepts that he teaches in that book is that you are not your mind. And so a lot of people struggle with this. They think that they are their mind, but your mind is nothing more than a tool. It's a tool that you use to achieve goals and to execute tasks the same way you use a hammer to put a nail in the wall. Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that they think they are their mind. So they're letting their mind run the show, which is like letting the hammer run the show. And so sometimes the way that this manifests is you have thoughts or emotions that are circling in your head that you feel like you don't have any control over, and they're overwhelming you, and they're basically controlling you. So you're allowing your mind to control you. At least that's what I've done in the past, by going down all these different rabbit holes and coming up with all these different scenarios and things that could possibly happen. And so the first step that he teaches in overcoming this is to just observe the thought or observe the emotion. Because once you observe it, you actually enter a higher state of consciousness, because the hammer cannot observe itself, but you can. You can observe yourself. And what that proves is that you are not your mind. So one thing that I've done to really help myself is, again, the first step is just observing it. Like, don't judge it, don't put an opinion on it, don't attach another thought or emotion to it. Just observe that it's taking place. And that's it. There are other steps that you could eventually get to. For me, what I do is I observe it and I identify it. And I say, okay, I'm having this thought. I'm experiencing this emotion right now. Okay, that's happening. Is this serving me? Yes or no? No. Okay. So what would serve me? What is the inverse or the reverse or the opposite of this thought or emotion that I'm having right now that would serve me? And that's where I start focusing. But again, that comes with self-awareness. So you got to be aware of your thoughts, you got to be aware of your emotions, and you got to be aware of your actions. Because at the end of the day, actions are all that matter. It doesn't matter what you think about doing. It doesn't matter what you feel like doing. What matters is what you actually do. The actions that you consistently take in your life are going to dictate your life and the outcome of your life. And so if you're not aware of your actions, you may continue performing behaviors that will ultimately ruin your life and certainly subtract from your confidence. So I try to reflect regularly to understand my motivations and my patterns and just be aware of them. And again, identify your strengths and weaknesses honestly and constructively. Look, sometimes you might have to ask for feedback or from an opinion from people that know you very well, who you feel will be honest in their opinion and their assessment of you. You got to be careful with this, because if you ask the wrong person, they could potentially wind up telling you things about yourself to make themselves feel better, and you could negatively let that affect you. But if there is somebody whose opinion you value, who you think would give you an honest answer, and by the way, just because you ask them for their opinion doesn't mean you need to accept it. But if enough people are telling you that they think you're strong in this area and maybe a little bit challenged in this area, that could be an eye-opener. Again, try new things, experience new things. You never really figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are unless you experience things. There is no substitution for repetitions. So guys, I hope this video was helpful to you. A little longer than my usual videos. If it was, leave a like, give me a thumbs up. It helps the algorithm. I'd love to hear your feedback, comments. Have you used any of this stuff? Have you found it to work for you? And if you enjoy this type of content, let me know in the comments so I'll create more of it. And if you do enjoy it, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so you get updated when I release more videos like this.